Okay. Yeah, you don't have that much power over me, Ariel.
Okay,
okay. Zaid, Yahir, Leitz, Shema, Oseb, Ever, Zad on day 2. So the willful, which is how... Did we decide on a translation? Not really. We didn't find a good English word to capture it. Well, maybe one will emerge. Most, what do you call it? Straight translation is like mazid, willful or intentional. And then Rabbeinu Yonah, we saw, said malicious. Okay, we'll have to explore that. And Yahir, haughty man. So those two things. Leitz, Shemo. Scoffer is his name, or scorner is his name. I'm just going to go with scoffer here. It's simpler. Scoffe. A lot of caffeine. All right. Oseb Ever Zadon. He acts with the rage of Zadon, however you translate Zadon. Okay, so our questions were, let's ignore Sadigon because we didn't end up doing that. Our questions were mainly definition questions. What does Zaid mean? What does Yahir mean? And then what is Leitz? What's that combo of both of them? What action is the second half of the pasuk describing as Oseh be'evras Zadon? He does what be'evras Zadon? Right? What does it mean Oseh? 5, what is the relationship between the two halves of the pasuk? Or David's question, what's the relationship between the quarters? I mean, if you only had one quality of each half, what would the result be? Like if you had Zaid without Yahir or Yahir without Zaid, what would we say about this guy? And then if you had Zadon, right, without the Evra, or the Evra without the Zadon, what would that imply or be? 6, what's the Havamina? Is the Havamina that this guy is not a Leitz? Is the Havamina that this guy does not act Evra Zadon? Is the Havamina that you need something else to make a Leitz, or the Leitz is defined differently? 7, given this definition, meaning once you define him as Zaid and Yahir, then what is being added? Why is it being called a Leitz? Okay, meaning just because you combine two things to make a new quality, that doesn't automatically dictate the name of the quality, right? So the name is giving us more data, right, that he mocks. And we've seen, either we like us or we as in me and my parts, we've seen that he does other things as well. So he is an alcoholic. We saw that last year. He's a deadbeat. He doesn't work. He's Yoshvei Kranos. He doesn't learn Torah. I don't remember if we saw that last year. Also, he hates rebuke. Okay, so there are lots of qualities of Leitz. Why not call him a rebucator? Why call him a scoffer? Yeah. Okay, why is this his name? 8, who's the audience of the pasuk? And we said there's 3 broad possibilities. Either it's talking to the would-be victims, people who could be affected by his mockery, his scornery, or it's talking to people who are on the way to becoming a Leitz, or it's talking to people who are in a position to stop someone from becoming a Leitz. 9, why is the quality of Yahir seemingly not manifested in the second half, right? Because you got Zaid and Zadon. Yahir, where's the Yehirus? Where's the arrogance? And then 10, why is this pasuk here in chapter 21? Okay, so we had Sean's idea, which is piggybacking off of Mati Rambam's idea, right? Which is last pasuk was Shomer people, Shomer Yitzaros Nafsho, that one who guards his mouth and tongue guards his soul from troubles. And that idea we explained to be that it's about impulse control and that and strengthening that ability to resist temptation. Piv is eating and Lashono is speaking. And we said that the 2 areas that are most readily accessible to act upon impulsively are what you say and what you eat. So if you practice restraint and control there, you're going to strengthen that muscle and save yourself from a lot of troubles that come not only from eating and speaking impulsively, but from lots of other areas of lack of restraint. So Sean wanted to say that this pasuk is saying what happens if you fail to do that, or what is a possible strategy that a person uses to entrench that failure in his personality, which is, let's say the person chooses the route of not exercising the self-restraint. So he's going to have to rationalize it and justify it, because people can't sit there with cognitive dissonance forever. So the way he's going to do it is he's going to reject and push down all of those parts that tell him that you're doing the wrong thing, or you shouldn't eat this, or you shouldn't say this. And he's going to have what do you call it in Freudian terms? Reaction formation. I mean, well, okay, you call it denial or whatever, but reaction formation is the wrong thing. He's going to deny those parts of himself, but he's going to do it through developing arrogant, haughty, secure, confident persona, which is aggressive towards anything internal or external that suggests or reminds him of those things. So in himself, he's going to push that stuff down. When he sees things in other people, like he sees other people like who have good qualities that come from self-restraint, he'll have to trash them and destroy them because they remind him of these aspects of himself that he doesn't want to see. He will also, as we saw from Rabbeinu Yonah, I know we're not giving Rabbeinu Yonah's pshah yet, he will also mock the pursuit of virtue and good midos in general, and the result of this is he's going to be in a constant state of anger, because anger is when reality is not in line with your desires, and then you lash out at reality instead of like changing yourself. And am I missing anything? I'm not going to go walk through.
Add something to like flesh it out a little bit.
Say again.
Like about why he feels the need to like push back against these things.
Yeah.
So I think when a person is like if they're like if this person has made the decision that they're gonna say whatever they want and like eat whatever they want, or I'm just gonna focus on saying whatever they want.
Yeah. In fact, the asterisk here, I think this puzzle makes me more inclined to say that the last one was not about eating. I think it would be smoother if it said it's specifically about speaking, thematically smoother. I don't think there's a problem, but I just want to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, like saying whatever is gonna feel the best in the moment.
Yeah.
Including, let's say, talking about people or things like that.
Yeah.
Because that's a very powerful draw. Like you see that by Lashon Hara. So once you get in the habit of doing that, it's not like if let's say you like get in the habit of driving too fast, where like you couldn't, like if something would make you like reconsider that, you can actually like then be like, oh, like it's not like it's something that's a lot like a behavior that's like relatively easy to change, whereas because it's so easy to talk about, then it's extremely difficult to try to change your speaking habits. So once this person has already like habituated himself to saying whatever he wants, then any indication that an indication that he should be doing something else, like what you said, then he's gonna feel the need to mock.
Okay, because I'm feeling very slow this morning, can you just boil it down to a sentence? Because I feel like I'm missing the point.
Okay, I was just elaborating on the mechanism.
Okay. Yeah, Sean?
I'm not sure if you said this, but the other thing was that he's called a scoffer because his identity is one where he's scoffing at himself, like those parts of himself, and he's scoffing at the things.
Correct. I retract. I think scorner really is better, because scoffing has to be done, or I think usually is like a verbal thing, but we're saying the essence is the attitude that he has towards these things. So scorner, I think, is better. Yeah.
Can you just give one example? I feel like I get it.
So I think I'm gonna feed two birds with one scone by even though you shouldn't feed scones to birds. But I'm gonna, we read through Rabbeinu Yonah, it'll make the image more vivid. And I'll give the examples through him, even though we're going to try to pursue a different idea.
He goes to kill two rats with one stone.
If you please. Yeah.
There's two thoughts. One, with the example Isaac gave with driving, I was just thinking about this now also. I think particularly these types of things that he is like blocking out are things that are not as clear a cause and effect as, say, like speeding and getting a ticket, right? That's like very clear, like what I did wrong. But when it's something like this is not a clear, like what did I do wrong that I can improve.
Correct. And I think part of the reason is the immediate feedback, right, of the ticket. And here, you're not getting that. But what's the big obstacle for him not realizing that he's doing wrong?
He's denying what he's doing wrong.
Right. It's the haughtiness, is the arrogance, is he's never even going to think that he could do wrong,
Yeah.
So
everyone else's fault.
Yeah, everyone, and look at these dummies,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Just one other thing also.
Yeah.
This sounds like a little bit like when there's when people put in a lot more work to cheat on tests and they actually do it to just actually understand the test.
Right.
It seems like he's putting in so much work and so much energy just to
right.
down everybody else when he could just very simply.
Correct. So I feel like if there probably exists a pasuk which highlights the tremendous amount of conflict and energy that this lifestyle relates eats up, or is saturated in, and that itself is a downside of this thing. Okay, let's read Rabbeinu Yonah. I'm not even going to read it in the Hebrew. I'm just going to translate as I go, just to refresh our memory. As we go through, think of examples to give for Ariel, but then I want to focus on analyzing Rabbeinu Yonah today, and then maybe comparing the two ideas. So he says, Zayd, the word Zayd includes cruelty and hatred of people and rejoicing at their downfall or misfortune and seeking out their harm. Yah here is a Baal Gaiva, someone who's egotistical. The explanation of the matter is that the man who has these two midos in his soul, namely malice and arrogance, is called a Leitz, because a Leitz includes them. And he is a Baal Lashon Hara, he's a Lashon Hara addict or a professional. He mocks and makes fun of people, which is the ultimate malice, because he will damage with his speech. He'll damage his friend with his speech and shame him and insult him and diminish his dignity, not for any profit or tangible benefit. And that's worse than someone who does it for monetary benefit. Also, if you join this with arrogance and haughtiness, by the way, this is not a complete sentence. Gam tishtatev im ha'hirus v'gaiva ki tach yiskaven l'seis dofi b'chaver v'lobilti heyos yisron ish alav. There needs to be a clause there, that I don't know how to correct it, but whatever. He, if you combine that malice with arrogance and haughtiness, where he wants to instill blemishes in his friend without any advantage to him, maybe there should be a comment here. Also, in the greatness of his haughtiness, he will blemish and diminish virtues, because he doesn't see in himself any one of these blemishes. And if he were to pay attention to his own faults, his own blemishes, he would be too ashamed to make fun of other people. And Chazal say that a Baal Lashon Hara is similar to a snake that will. Read that last part? Yeah. So he says, Gam begodel gavaso, also due to the greatness of his haughtiness, yifgum, he will blemish or impugn v'yachis hamalos, and diminish virtues like good midos. The einenu roe benafsho echem min ha'pugam, will not see in himself any one of these faults.
Faults meaning
the faults that are the opposites of these virtues.
Okay.
That's how I'm understanding it. If he were to pay attention to his own faults, nichlam haya mihios baz v'lo iglazo, he would be too ashamed to mock and make fun of other people. And Chazal say that the Baal Lashon Hara is similar to a snake that harms without any tangible benefit, as opposed to a lion or a wolf that maul and eat, but the snake doesn't do it. Okay, fine. So all of that is filling out the picture of this this Leitz. So can we come up with an example of just playing out Sean's idea through a person in real life? Yeah.
I was thinking the possibility of someone who's a comedian.
Yeah.
Where pretty much everything that someone else does right, everything that they do wrong,
yeah,
is constantly never actually looked at for what it is, but it's always turned into something different. Where someone else is oh, if you're a great at whatever you are, yeah, so I'm gonna figure out a way to make fun of it and derail this great thing that you do.
Right. So I think that and maybe I'm being overly looking at through rose-colored glasses here, okay, but I'd say that of comedians, there are ones that are more aggressive and ones that are more like Jerry Seinfeld, making observations. He can be aggressive too. So I'd say that with the aggressive ones, you get this underlying sense that they just think that people are ridiculous, not in a what an amusing creature Richard Feynman way, but in a this person's dumb, that person's dumb. I would agree with you to that extent. Yeah.
Yeah. The example that I could think of is a classic one, you're a bully in a school.
Right. That I think is a good example. Right.
If, you're a good student and the guy, all the answers to the questions.
Yeah.
You have a good student, and then the guy student right behind you is you know, like that's
right. Yeah, and just to connect the bullying thing, I think just more directly to Sean's idea is that the bully, like the bully knows he's a bully. I mean, bullies know that they are like verbally or physically abusing other people, but and they probably also sense that they're doing it impulsively. Like on some level, they sense that they're doing it impulsively, but they have rejected the part of themselves that says you shouldn't do this. And that it's funny because that itself is a weakness, which leads in their warped coping mechanism to further bullying because they don't want to face the fact that they have this weakness, you know.
That's why you gotta fight back. No, seriously, because it puts them in a prison and start recognizing that, you know, because if they start to feel the treatment.
Yeah, it could be. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we did mention yesterday that that's one way that the Leitz can reform is if he sees the consequences himself and not through review, Kelly.
Sounds like the Leitz needs to do something to level up the playing field.
Yeah.
Like he has no control over his own psyche or his own emotions, so he has to control the environment around him to fit his.
Correct, and I think it's more than controlling the environment because I think that's true of all Mishlei fools that they try to control the environment or control reality. I think for him, it's a matter of I think the leveling the playing field is a good example or a good phrase is that it has to do with people being better than him. You know, not just that he wants to control what happens to him. In fact, that's not really his main focus. Is he wants to make himself always better than other people, but doing it by putting them down.
Right.
You know, yeah.
So that part that I had you reread.
Yeah.
Rabbeinu Yonah seems to be taking it pretty far in that, right? So what makes a virtue identifiable to a person, right? They see that it's creating some benefit.
Yeah.
Right? They see that, this is a virtuous thing because it's resulting in whatever.
Yeah.
Right. He's going so far as to say the person can't even see that the things that it's resulting in are good and therefore can't see the faults within himself.
Interesting.
Right. Because he switches from virtue to not seeing faults within himself.
Right. Let me think about that for 1 second. Because I understood, I'm going to say the way I understood the Rabbeinu Yonah, and then let's contrast the two ways of understanding it. I understood it that, sorry, just the gears turning. That, let me reread it. Yifkom v'yachis hama'alos ve'enenu roe b'nafshe ech min ha'pagayim. It's interesting. So are those two things or are those one thing? I don't know how I was reading it. Say how you're reading again.
Can you just read the words?
Yeah, sorry. In his great haughtiness, he will blemish and diminish the virtues, and he doesn't see in himself one of the blemishes. And if he were to pay attention to his blemishes, he would be too embarrassed to make fun of other people.
Yeah. All right. So he's like, how can you diminish the virtue, right?
Yeah.
Unless you don't see the value of like the virtue. So
right.
it seems to me that he, because he's not seeing the absence of this thing within himself.
Yeah.
Right. So then he can't see the positiveness of the virtue. And so, or vice versa, because he can't see the positiveness of the virtue.
Yeah.
Right. Therefore, he can't. Right. Because he, on a very base level, can't see things that are like betterments of other people.
Yeah.
Because if he recognized those things, right, then that would mean that people are higher than him in certain aspects.
Yeah.
Right. So because of that, he needs to blind himself from all these things which are virtuous.
Right.
Right. By making those things not good things to have, right, then he can't see any of the faults because those are not things that a person can have.
Yeah. So let's play this with an example because I do think that there is there are two dynamics going on here. So let's say talk about the fact that he hates learning and mocks people who learn Torah, right? So what you're saying is he doesn't recognize the value of Torah because if he did, that would force him to recognize that these people are greater than him in some respect.
Yeah, meaning the reality of learning Torah is it gives a person certain benefits, right? And you can see them, right? That's how you know that learning Torah is virtuous, right? So the person can see the person learning Torah, right?
Yeah.
He has to because he's saying, why are you learning this thing?
Right.
And if he's saying, why are you learning this thing? It must mean that he can't see that the person is getting benefit from that thing. Right. So it's not that the person isn't getting benefit from the thing.
Right.
He's just seeing the person doing or learning Torah, but is ignoring on a conscious level or on a subconscious level.
Not allowing himself to see.
He's not allowing himself to see any of the benefits. And that's what allows him to then mock it.
Okay, correct. So I think that's one dynamic, but then the other dynamic is I think what you were mentioning yesterday, which is that, and I'm going to say this in the Torah learning example, but I think it could apply other areas also, is that the other thing that's preventing him from seeing it is that it would necessitate, because it reminds him of the path that he's chosen to not take, and it would necessitate changing himself. And I feel like psychologically those are two different things. Yeah, that there's that he is not allowing himself to see the benefits that come from this virtue, because that would entail him recognizing that other people are better than him in some respect. Then there's also the previous pasuk's dynamics, which is that, you know, he got on this road because he didn't want to exercise self-control so that he can indulge in certain pleasures. And if he were to recognize the virtues of learning, it would necessitate him giving up that addiction. I think those are two things that merge in action, but
how I'm seeing it is the system you're talking about is fueling the system that I'm talking about.
Yes, I think that's a good relationship.
Resistance to letting things go makes it so that he can't see the reality.
Right. And that fits with your learning of the flow of the two psukim. That it started with the fact that he wanted to get more taiva, or to say what he wants. And then then he needed to build this whole edifice to keep that machinery in place. And then now it's like a desperate thing. Ellie, did you have your hand up earlier that you want to say something, or did I just hallucinate? Okay. So now focusing in the last 6 minutes, that's a good review though, because I think I feel clear on it. So now this is where the Rabbeinu Yonah learns the chidush. Okay, and this is the new point I want to focus on. Oseh be'ever zadon, he acts in the wrath of malice. Ha'ish asher elelo, the guy who has these qualities. Al tadam b'nafshcha, don't imagine in your soul ki avon halashon bilvad imo, that the only sin he has is speech. Ach lo yechad b'fol, but he will not sin in action. Meaning, don't think that. Lo chen adavar, that's not true. Aval oseh im chaver be'ever zadon, but he will act with his fellow, meaning like against his fellow, with the wrath of anger. Ki la'is shichos al adam, at a time when he gets angry at someone, yazikehu, he will harm him, like physically. Or in action, not necessarily like punching harm, but like physically. V'yase imo be'ever zadon, he will act with him in the wrath of zadon. Ki ein kas kamo kas bal halashon, there's no anger like the anger of a bal lashon hara. V'gam yidua ki hagaiva tagbil kas, and we also know that haughtiness increases anger. Af ki mishin nimtzaos bo shte midos ela hagaiva v'hazadon ki yazik b'kaso al hashkis, to the point where someone who has these two midos will harm until he destroys someone. Okay, so just to state in terms of our questions what Rabbeinu Yonah is doing, he's saying, who's the audience? It is the bystander. He's not addressing someone who's becoming Leitz. I mean, indirectly he is, but he's saying, if you're around someone who's a Leitz, don't tell yourself, oh, this person only engages in verbal abuse, but he would never actually harm somebody, you know, like through action. To the contrary, he will harm somebody, okay, if his anger gets to that point. And then the chidush of that is twofold though. One is that he'll harm somebody in action, but then the second chidush is that the anger of a bal lashon hara is greater than the anger of everyone else. Yeah.
Is he necessarily talking about like a fully formed Leitz, or someone who is becoming a Leitz? Because it seems, or at least to me, right? So the Havamina is that he's got some internal self-control issues.
Yeah.
All right. So he's got some internal self-control issues.
Right.
Like let him work out his thing, right? It's just internal.
Yeah.
Right? And this is saying, no, it's not going to just be internal.
Right.
When the internal gets skewed, everything else is going to get skewed around him. And so you need to be careful.
So I'm open to that idea, but I would, the way I'm learning him, and I'll explain why in a second, is that that I think the developmental trajectory of bal lashon hara is like in 3 phases. Okay. Sorry, of the Leitz is in 3 phases. One is the previous pasuk of lack of impulse control. Second stage is you become a Leitz. Okay, third stage is oseh be'ever zadon, is that a certain level of anger will cause a lashing out in action. And I think you need to get to a critical point, meaning I don't think that the person who's on his way to becoming a Leitz is going to, I mean, maybe like in rare cases will act on it. but I think that you need to get to a certain critical threshold. And the reason why I think this is from outside of the pasuk, which is that lashon hara and mockery and all that other bad stuff is a very easy and cowardly way to harm somebody. And you can also bypass your guilt because you tell yourself, I'm not really like doing anything, And I think that there needs to be a development, devolution, whatever, of this personality to the point where where the anger translates directly into action. Like I think it needs to get to a critical threshold.
Tilt his face.
But right, yeah, this guy, these people. Well, it's funny because that is a raya that like these people will start off mocking people behind their back. Then as it goes on, they'll be more and more comfortable with, or like less restrained with mocking people to their face, and then it could get to the point where it goes in action. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I'm just also thinking insofar as like the way that this guy internally and externally like mirror themselves a lot. I feel like externally he's very much like this like wrecking ball, just like messing everything over. I think there's a lot of that internally too, where once he has these stripes inside, that he keeps acting in ways that will like fight the different identities that he has within himself. Yeah, and he's just gonna keep hurting himself further and further and further as he goes along.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Yeah.
Right. So it seems like he's becoming more and more brazen.
Right.
So I guess
to use Sadigon's word, right? Because that's how Sadigon puts this whole puzzle in terms of brazenness.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, right. That was the just let's just read it just in case the audacious and bold-faced man is called a Leitz. He enacts audacity with power.
Yeah. All right. So I guess for me it seems like the pasuk is saying that the threshold of a Leitz is when he's become brazen enough to cross the threshold into action.
Yeah, I think so.
So then,
sorry. Did you say that's the point where he becomes a Leitz? Okay,
that's how.
That's interesting. Yeah, you could learn it that way too. Yeah.
In which case, it seems like Rabbeinu Yonah is talking about, or is telling you to address this before there's a critical threshold.
Yeah.
And make sure you intervene before that critical threshold. So
I definitely see how you can learn it, and I think the reason why I'm not learning it that way is because I think that that in Mishlei, the Leitz is usually not depicted as acting. And that's why this is like acting to harm people. He's usually just depicted as speaking to harm people. So I think that the fact that Rabbeinu Yonah like localizes the chidush, that like be careful because he could act on it or will act on it. But this is like this type of anger comes from an explosion of Leitzano. So like like when it boils over, as opposed to, that's why I wouldn't want to make, if this were the part of the core definition of a Leitz, which you can learn the pasuk that way, right? Like if you just had this pasuk, you would learn it that way. If it was part of the core definition, I feel like we would see a lot more psukim
where he's actually
acting, or the name would change, Yeah.
So then a person, I guess I'm curious on what's the threshold in terms of shifting into Leitz too, right? Because we said Leitz is someone who is not going to respond to rebuke. Yeah. Right. So at what point is it, right? In our previous pasuk, presumably he's not a Leitz yet. Yeah. Right. He's wants to say things or do certain things, and he's got his impulses still there, and he's starting to ignore them. Yeah. At a certain point, he shifts over into Leitz. Yeah. And then from Leitz, he can get even further into actually acting physically. Right. And this is a similar question here, which I don't know, is does the Leitz become a different personality, like in a further stage of evolution? Like, for example, could you go from being a Leitz to being a Rasha, or is Rasha through a different developmental trajectory? Here's what I propose we do. So I guess there's two questions, a macro question and a micro question. Macro question is, would you like to take this up as a sugya next week of like examining other psukim about the Leitz to try to refine this and this understanding, or would you rather go on in Mishlei?
I see like a good.
I'd like to do it.
Here, yeah.
Okay, so that's one yes and one yes.
How long does it take? I mean, I'm fine with either.
We can take it as long as we want.
It can take more than a week or 2 weeks.
Here's what I'm thinking is what we should do. I think is I want to compile all the psukim about Leitz and then just read all the psukim, just so we get a snapshot of that, but then keep our focus on this pasuk. That way we're like I don't want to learn all of the other psukim in depth. Like I do, but I don't think that that's going to be a good use of our time here. So get like a broad view in order to refine this, but keep our eye on this. Okay. So let's plan on doing that. And then the next question is, who is planning on coming tomorrow? And do you want to do another day on the Rabbeinu Yonah while it's fresh, or do you want to do Q&A? So you're not coming.
No.
What about you? Planning on coming. Okay. And do you have a preference, Mishlei or Q&A?
I don't really care.
Okay.
I can do it.
Okay, Mati? Not coming. Sean?
I'm coming, but I think if there's not a lot of people coming, then it would be preferable to hold off on this.
Okay, I hear.
I think so.
Okay, and you can come. Do you have a preference on what we do?
Maybe Q&A.
Okay, all right. So let's plan on doing Q&A tomorrow, and then we'll pick this up next week, Leonetta. Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
have a good day.
Thank you.
Yep.